The president has, he held a news conference just before Senator Sanders came on our program in which he said, we're not going to be putting troops in Iraq. And my response to that is good on that. Good on you for that. I saw this interview this morning with former Senator and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, in which she had said that a plan for Syria had been prepared for the president by her and others, and that he declined to send troops into Syria. I believe the president was right there, too. Here's the weird situation, and then Senator Clinton was wrong. Here's the weird, or Secretary Clinton. Here's the situation we find ourselves in. Iran is now helping defend Maliki's Shia-run Iraqi government. Because the government in Iraq now is, the prime minister is a Shia, and he has been aggressively dissing the Sunnis. He won't let any Sunnis into his government. And Saddam Hussein, of course, was a Sunni, and the Sunnis used to run Iraq, and there's a lot of Sunnis in Iraq, and a lot of Shia. Iran is a Shia country. Saudi Arabia is a Sunni country. Saudi Arabia is what bin Laden and Al-Qaeda came out of. Iran is what Hezbollah came out of. I mean, it's some pretty grim actors on both sides. But here's the problem. In addition to Iraq, right, just north of Iraq, you've got Syria. And Syria has a Shia government, right, Bashar al-Assad, and he's theoretically or arguably aligned more with Iran because it's Shia and Shia. And the guys who are trying to take him down, the so-called freedom fighters that John McCain wants us to be supporting, they're the Sunnis. So the Sunnis are trying to take down the government in Syria, and they're also trying to take down the government in Iraq. But they're also ISIL, the Islamic State of Syria and the Levant, which is basically, as we also call them ISIS, the Islamic State of Syria and Iraq, or ISSI, I guess, whatever it is. But you get the point. So if we're supporting the rebels, if you want to call them that, in Syria, that money, support, and weaponry is ending up in Iraq being used against the government that we helped put in place in Iraq. And if we support the government in Iraq, we're joining forces with Iran, who is helping also support the Assad government in Syria. There is no good option here. And this all can be placed at the footsteps of George W. Bush, who's sitting around painting paintings of himself trying to wash the blood off his hands. George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and Gonzalez. I think Gonzalez was just a useful idiot in this. Colin Powell was... It was sadder than a useful idiot. He was manipulated. Lawrence Wilkerson, who is his right-hand man, has, unwilling to diss his boss. And I get it. We've interviewed him. And he's like, Colin Powell was lied to, too. And then you've got the people like John Yoo and Jay Bybee, the authors of the torture memos and things like that. And so we've got this absolute screaming, flaming disaster. But frankly, if we give weapons to help in Syria, which we are doing, those weapons end up in Iraq. And we're just, there's this giant bonfire going on. And it's a Shia versus Sunni bonfire. And it's going on in Syria and Iraq, and they're contiguous. And the Saudis are hoping it doesn't go to Saudi Arabia, and the Qataris are hoping it doesn't go there, and the Iranians are hoping it doesn't go there, and everybody in the region is very nervous about this, and it's all because George W. Bush decided that he was going to have a little war. Right? Arguably, you can take this back to Maggie Thatcher. Maggie Thatcher came into office in 1978, and said that she was going to, for the first time in the history of modern industrial democracy, she was going to try the economic policies of von Hayek and, of Frederick Hayek and von Mises, the Chicago School boys. She was going to try libertarian economics. Tax cuts for rich people, cut social services for poor people. Amanda Marcotte has a great piece out on Pando Daily today in which she says, if these guys really believe this, if these rich people really believe that you should cut off services to poor people because that will incentivize them to get off their butts and go working, why don't we cut off all the rich money for the rich people and make them work? I mean, if rich people really believe that the thing that incentivizes people to work is not having money, let's take away their money. Or is it that having money makes you work? Then let's give money to poor people. I mean, it's like they can't have it both ways. Their logic is completely illogical. But anyhow, Maggie Thatcher came into office saying, we're going to do this economically. We're going to break the coal miners' union, the largest union in England, which she did in the first few months of her administration. She said, we're going to break the biggest union, declare war on labor, start implementing neoliberal economic reforms, these what today we call conservative economics or Reaganomics. And she was very unpopular as a consequence of that. To get her popularity back, she said, we need a little war. People love it when you have a little war. Little war that you can quickly win. So she invaded the Falkland Islands, and her popularity tripled. She went from like 10, 15%, 20% popularity. People really disliked her after she broke the coal miners' union. She up to like 70, 80%. It just exploded. 2 years later, Ronald Reagan is elected in 1980. He starts doing neoliberal reforms, the conservative, Reaganomic stuff, really aggressively in 83, 84, 85. It's not working out so well. When he dropped the top tax rate below 50% in 86, with, the next year, 87, we had the biggest stock market crash since the Great Depression. So he's like, well, we need a little war, too. And so he declares a little war on Grenada. We invade Grenada, to help the medical students, right? We invaded Grenada, threw out the guy who was the democratically elected president there because he was making nice with Castro. And Reagan's popularity soared. So George Herbert Walker Bush looked at this and said, hey, I need a little war. I'm not so popular. People don't like me. I raise taxes. So I need a little war. So April Gillespie says to Saddam Hussein, if you want to go after Kuwait, we won't do anything about it. And so Saddam Hussein says, cool. I mean, you guys, we were his ally, right? Don Rumsfeld went over there and sold him the poison gas he used on the Kurds. So he invades Kuwait, and then George Herbert Walker Bush says, we'll have a little war. And his war lasted exactly 100 hours. He was so proud of that. Little war. And his popularity went back up. Jimmy Carter was the only president who didn't have a little war. Clinton's was in Bosnia. I'm not sure it was so politically motivated. And then George W. Bush comes along and says, well, I need a little war, too. I think I'll have a little war in Iraq. Well, sorry, you can't have a little war in Iraq. It's going to be a big war. Iraq's a big country. And it's still going on. So, we're either with Iran or we're with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Take your pick. Which is it? Hezbollah or Al-Qaeda? Who do you want to support? And this is why the strategy that we should be taking in the Middle East is we should stop our support of the rebels in Syria, and we should stop our support of the Maliki government in Iraq, and let them sort out their own region without so much firepower from us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Because we're essentially pouring gasoline on a bonfire, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and the bigger it gets, the more civilians die. We'll be back with your calls. That's my rant for Anything Goes Friday. It's up to you now.